Hello and welcome back to the Daily Bible Summary, where the goal is to renew your mind as we read a new chapter every day and ask, what can I learn? Today's episode is entitled Old Habits Die Hard. If you've read chapter 20, let's get started. The narrative of this short chapter will certainly sound familiar. Abraham has moved southward towards a city in which would later be part of the Philistine territory called Gerar. Immediately, there's a problem. Abraham falls back into old habits and tells everyone that Sarah is his sister. As we've discussed, this is technically true. She was his half-sister. But it hides the much more important relationship that she's his wife. Due to this misleading information, King Abimelech takes Sarah to be one of his wives. Next, we see that God appears to Abimelech in a dream and tells him, "Behold, you are a dead man." And the reason? Well, it was because Sarah was, as the text says, she is a man's wife. Abimelech, as we might expect, protests. "Lord, will you kill an innocent people? Did he not say to me, 'She is my sister'? And she herself said, 'He is my brother'? In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands, I have done this." God, who is just, acknowledges Abimelech's innocence. "Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart, and it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her." But now Abimelech has a choice, and God makes it very clear. "Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours." What would you do? Well, Abimelech, he got up early in the morning, and I imagine he got up very early in the morning, assembled his servants to tell him what God had said. Then he calls Abraham and confronts him. The questions really do sound like accusations, and rightly so. "What have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you that you brought upon me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done to me things that ought not to be done." Abraham's response really seems weak. It might be truthful, but it doesn't show wisdom. "I did it because I thought there is no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, 'This is the kindness you must do to me. At every place to which we come, say of me, he is my brother.'" In other words, Adam made this arrangement with Sarah years ago, and it's been his go-to strategy whenever he's afraid. Old habits indeed. Abimelech, however, realizes his problem is not as much with Abraham, but with God. To move on with Sarah would be a sin against God and lead to death. He must clear himself of any wrongdoing. So he gives Abraham sheep, oxen, and servants, and tells him he can stay in the land anywhere he wants to. To Sarah, he says, he has paid her brother 1,000 pieces of silver as a sign that you are vindicated in the eyes of all who are with you, and before everyone you are cleared. Abraham prays for Abimelech, and God heals him and his household so that they can have children again. Verse 18 explains that the Lord had closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Now, this last verse suggests that some time passed between the time Sarah was taken and the time that God gave warning to Abimelech, perhaps weeks or months, at least enough time to think that something was indeed wrong. As God closed their wombs, the women would have noticed missed cycles. Now, if you're familiar with Esther's story, there was a year-long purification ritual before she went to the king. It wouldn't have been a whole year in this case, considering God's promise that he said about this time next year, Sarah will have a son. But perhaps something similar delayed the consummation here long enough to be noticed. I know it's speculation here, but bear with me, please. Why would God wait any length of time at all? Why not just intervene right away? Well, two things happened in waiting. One, Abimelech begins to see something's wrong in his household. And if his first guess wasn't that it was the God of heaven and earth doing it, when God appeared in a dream, there was no doubt who was responsible. He knew he'd better obey. And second, perhaps Abraham himself needed to learn a lesson here too. As time wore on, each day and maybe each new week, I wonder if Abraham was mourning his mistake. As I said, it is speculation, and we don't always get the backstory. But since God does things for our good, I can see that Abraham may have learned a lesson here too. So what can we learn from this chapter? First, old habits die hard. It would be wonderful if we were all just stopped from sinning as soon as we were united with Christ. On one hand, it's frustrating that Abraham would lie about Sarah after experiencing all the consequences after lying about her in Egypt, as we read in Genesis chapter 12. But it's always easy to see somebody else's fault rather than our own. Easy to point the finger while ignoring the three that are pointing back at us. It's easy to say, if it had been me, never would I ever. We all have patterns of sin we risk falling back into when we're afraid or under pressure. Recognizing those patterns is the first step to breaking them. On the other hand, there's comfort in the fact that even Abraham, who had such a close relationship with God, was still subject to colossal mistakes. This is our second application. God is patient with our repeated failures. We do not justify Abraham's sin, nor do we use it as justification for ours. But we can learn that God will have mercy and patience with us in spite of our weaknesses. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in loving and steadfast love, Psalm 103 says. God didn't abandon Abraham after this failure. We see that he protected Sarah, preserved his promise, and gave Abraham another chance. He does the same thing for us. Still, we should remember that our direction is key. If we're trying to walk in the ways of the Lord, there is patience. If, however, we presume on the riches of his kindness, mercy, and patience, there will be judgment. Third, sometimes pagans act more righteously than God's people do. And this is humbling. Abraham, the man of faith, lied, whereas Abimelech, the pagan king, acted with integrity. When confronted by God, Abimelech immediately obeyed. He didn't make excuses, and he didn't delay. He got up early in the morning and made it right. Meanwhile, Abraham is making weak excuses. I thought there was no fear of God in this place. But clearly, there was a fear of God in Abimelech. Sometimes unbelievers put us to shame with their honesty and integrity. That should make us examine ourselves. Am I living up to what I claim to believe? Finally, don't assume the worst about people. Abraham's problem started with a false assumption. There's no fear of God at all in this place, he thought. He judged Gerar without evidence and acted on that judgment. But he was wrong. Abimelech proved to be a man of integrity who feared God and responded righteously when confronted. How often do we make similar assumptions? We assume people won't respond well to the gospel, so we don't share it. We assume a workplace or community is hostile to God, so we hide our faith. We assume the worst and act accordingly. But sometimes we're wrong, and our fear prevents us from seeing the good that is actually there. Jesus teaches us in John 7, verse 24, to judge not by appearances, but to judge with right judgment. Tomorrow, Lord willing, we'll finally see the promised Son arrive. After all the waiting, all the failures, all the detours, Isaac will be born. As we read each chapter and see God's promises come into fruition, we continue to renew our minds.